Okay, good evening. I'm Lupe Gutierrez, the moderator for this evening. On behalf of the True North Organizing Network, I want to welcome you to our Candidates Forum. For those of you who don't know me, please allow me to give you a little background on True North and myself. I'm a leader in the True North organization. We are nonpartisan, multiracial, multi-faith-based organization comprised of a variety of people of different ages, background, ethnicities, working in Del Norte and Humboldt County and the adjacent tribal lands. True North is a member of Faith in Action National Network that exists in 140 cities and 17 states. And we are affiliated with PICO, or People in Communities Organizing California at a state level. I've been involved with the organization at a local, state, and federal level and can say with great earnest, we are genuinely an influential network. I was first introduced to True North through the Belong training. It was good timing in my life because I was feeling disconnected. So I thought, this is destiny. But a little side story. I was also at the time a library board member. One day, as I was driving into the parking lot of the library, a homeless man drove his bicycle across me on the sidewalk. He had a little red trailer attached to the bike and all his belongings, and a little dog that had popped his head out from the trailer was with him. As I drove in, he turned around and he gave me this really angry look. I glanced at him and looked perturbed, puzzled, and I frowned at him. We met again in the library. As he was checking out and I was talking to a volunteer, again, he just stared and he glared at me. I looked at him and said, "What is your problem?" Well, as you can guess, that question did not go over very well, and neither did the conversation that followed. However, this experience stirred my curiosity. I began researching the topic of homelessness. I began talking to other people and discovered, like all people, they want dignity and power, which brings me to this point. At the core of True North values are these beliefs. Human dignity is at the heart of justice and progress, and every person needs the opportunity to be heard and respected. Also, that power is determined by the things we value. Consequently, we organize people according to what is important to them. True North builds relationships based on shared values, hopes, concerns to create a vision and serve our community. So it is with this experience that I am instructing our candidates regarding a couple of guidelines. Please demonstrate dignity to all candidates and refrain from making comments about your opponents. Instead, we want to hear about you, your values, and why we should vote for you. We want to host this forum to respect everyone's time, so please stick to the time limits. Our timekeeper is Denise. She will use a green card for a 30-second warning and a pink card for stop. For everyone's information, tonight's agenda and questions were developed by a team of the True North core leaders with input from other community members. They are based on issues that come from active work in this community, as well as reflect some of the current priorities of True North leaders and the community members that we are in relationship with. All candidates were invited to attend tonight's forum and each received the question in advance in order to develop thoughtful responses. Let's begin with, on the ballot, our measures T and U, which will repeal R&S. We have Eric Weir, a Crescent City manager, and Neil Lopez, the county administrative officer, which will explain measures R&S. I would like to now invite our Crescent City manager, Eric Weir.
All right, thank you, Lupe and Denise. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us to really inform the community on this important ballot measure that will be on the November ballot. So let me share my screen real quick and we can walk through some information on Measure S. So Measure T is what's going to be on the ballot for the city voters, and then there'll be a Measure U, which will be on for the county and city voters. So we'll talk a little bit about both. I'll primarily be talking about Measure T, which is directly related to Measure S, and then CA Lopez will be talking about U, which is directly related to Measure R, trying to take some of the confusion out of the alphabet soup that is out there. So this is the ballot question that will be there for Measure T. And so Measure T eliminates Measure S, which is the essential services ballot measure that was placed before the city voters in 2020. So it's a general sales tax and support city services. The 1%, and it's only in the city limits. When we talk about Measure R, that's also 1%, but it's only in the county. They do not overlap. If you spend money in the city and it's sales tax related, it will go to Measure S in the city. If you spend your money in the county, it goes to Measure R and stays in the county. For Measure S, it was voted in by the city residents at almost 2/3, 64.57%. This is not something we take lightly. This is a responsibility that we have been granted by our city voters, and we want to implement the funding for what they wanted to be funded by. For us, it is four main things. It's the city fire department, it's the city police department, it's our local streets, and it's our local swimming pool. In regard to the fire department, all of this started, really a lot of these key things started well before 2020 when this measure was enacted. Started with planning and strategizing about how to create sustainable, essential services for our community. But the fire department was the Crescent City Fire and Rescue Master Plan. This primarily was driven around staffing. Our Chief Wakefield, dedicated his life to this department, dedicated his life to this community. This fire department responds to over 2,000 calls per year. Steve did it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Fortunately, Steve gave his life for this position and for this job. This plan creates sustainability so that we can have this service for our community in the future. So it addresses staffing. It addresses it by providing 3 additional paid captain positions. It addresses the volunteer support. This department is nothing without our volunteers. It addresses apparatus replacement. These engines are getting older and need replaced. Looking at the police department, again, looking at staffing. What do we need to offer our community that sustainable police department, that law enforcement protection that they need? This funding allows for additional boots on the ground, 3 additional officers, dedicated detective position, additional canine officers, vehicles. We have 2 vehicles right now that have over 200,000 miles on them. It addresses that by having new patrol vehicles out on the streets. Equipment, body cameras, tasers, duty weapons. Accountability, transparency is at the forefront of this, as well as addressing our facilities that the police have in regard to the dilapidated station that they currently have. Brendan Municipal Pool. We're surrounded by water. Smith River, Klamath River, Pacific Ocean. It's imperative that we all learn how to swim, learn water safety, and then also from a health standpoint, having it there for physical rehabilitation is imperative. We looked at a master plan in 2019. Again, but basically what they stated was pools don't pay for themselves. This is a service that needs to be funded, almost to the point of 2/3 funding from some sort of agency. The Fred Ender Municipal Pool on a yearly operational basis now has a $650,000 deficit. So basically the city has to put in that amount of money to keep it sustainable, keep it operational. This is primarily driven with a lot of the minimum wage increases. And Measure S currently allocates $380,000 towards that. From that, by keeping it open, now we have partnerships with the healthcare district. There's free swimming lessons offered to anybody that wants them, free recreation swims on Saturdays, and even monthly senior passes available to those that are income qualified. So Measure S also funds the operations. It's funding the rehabilitation of our pool boilers and dehumidification system, as well as locker room flooring improvements. It also provided the funding to get the pool reopened once we had the ceiling issues that we had earlier this year. Our streets speak for themselves. So a big part of Measure S is paying for street rehab. Those of you may not know this, in the city, we have 23 miles of roadways. We have, that's equivalent to over 400 blocks of streets. Get inside, I have 30 seconds, so I will try to make this quick. Our streets, everyone knows they need repairs. 400 blocks without Measure S, the city receives from gas tax about $300,000 to $400,000 a year. That we could complete a rehab of 1 block per year. That would take us 400 years to get our streets in the shape they need to be. Measure S provides significant funding for that. It also provides funding for pedestrian improvements as well as the over 800 streetlights that we have. Skip kind of through a little bit on this. We have a plan. Measure S will have a 5-year plan to address not only the maintenance that you saw going around town, which is 8th Street, 9th Street, kind of that preservation piece of it, which is keeping our good streets good, but also addressing the streets that need a lot more help, like Front Street. So Front Street under construction, spring of 2023. I am out of time, so let me leave you with this. I will ask for just 1 more minute if I can, Denise, and you are doing a really good job. So this money stays local. This money gets paid not only by local residents, also by tourists. It doesn't apply to essential services like groceries or prescription medications, and none of it is used for administrative salaries or raises. Oversight committee is imperative to this. They have met several times. How do we compare on a local tax basis? Even with this, we're still below many of our other surrounding communities. And then getting back to Measure T. So Measure T is on the ballot. We talked about that. A yes vote on T eliminates this funding that we talked about. So it eliminates the significant funding for police, fire, streets, and pool. A no vote on T keeps it in place and provides for these essential services that we just talked about: police, fire, streets, and pool. And that is more than the time I actually got. So I appreciate your patience.
Very much, Eric. I appreciate the information. Next, we have our County Administrative Officer, Neil Lopez. Neil.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. I appreciate this opportunity to share a presentation on Measure R, as City Manager Ware mentioned in his introduction. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. We'll see how this works out. Did it work? Good. Thank you. Okay, this presentation is basically intended to inform voters. It's to provide a brief overview of Measure R. That's going to be the focus here. And it's basically to focus on how Measure R has been budgeted, utilized, and accounted for since the collection began in April of 2021. Okay, as City Manager, we're also covered. Measure R is a 1% sales tax in the unincorporated areas of the county. It was approved by voters in November of 2020. It is separate from Measure S. The 2 tax measures are each collected in either the county or the city and represent a 1% countywide sales tax. Unlike the property tax that is imposed solely on property owners within the county, sales tax spreads collection to non-residents who also benefit from enhanced vital services supported by Measure R. It is undisputable that Measure R has expanded and improved vital services that are provided by the county. Measure R was approved by voters to support vital services such as law enforcement, responding to natural disasters and health emergencies, emergency dispatch for fire, ambulance, and law enforcement, jail and criminal justice services, blight and public nuisances, other general services such as community development, planning services, and veteran services, as well as public infrastructure and improvements. As we all know, in order to expand, support, and maintain vital services needed by this community, you need people. All of the uses tied to the positions were based on the demand for services and the county's ability to recruit and retain staff. A couple of examples I'd like to point out is the addition of the code enforcement officer. This brings this department to 2 full-time positions, which last year received over 447 new cases, and have already received 279 new cases this year. Another one I'd like to point out is animal services supervisor. This brings this department to 3 full-time positions, which received well over 400 calls for service last year. The fiscal year 21-22 budget included $1.2 million of anticipated revenue and just over $1.5 million budgeted expenditures. The difference you see between the anticipated revenue and the budgeted expenditures was offset by sales tax that collected from the previous fiscal year. Although the voters approved Measure R in November of 2020, the sales tax was not implemented until April of 2021. The collections for 2021 were April through June. Fiscal year 22 budget and actual expenditures are broken down on the following slide, which I will share with you. This is the vital services that were supported by Measure R during fiscal year 21-22. Not included in this graph, but also budgeted was public infrastructure at $468,421. Nothing was expended under this category in fiscal year 21-22, which I'll explain further on the next slide. Fiscal year 21-22 actual revenue actually exceeded projections, and the county received just over $1.85 million. Total expenditures for fiscal year 21-22 were $554,841, and this was primarily due to the inability to fill vacancies. I think a lot of us have faced that. The recruitment and retention over the past couple of years has been very difficult. With regard to public infrastructure spending and capital asset purchases, the county's goal is to establish a fund balance sufficient enough to implement meaningful projects. We do not believe at the county that the voters intended to provide short-term solutions for long-term problems. Fiscal year 22-23, and despite the positive momentum, Measure R now faces an unsettled future. As city manager Weir mentioned, as well as those who introduced us tonight, Lupe and Denise, Measure U and Measure T will be on the ballot in November, and if approved, would repeal Measure R and Measure S. Based on that uncertainty for fiscal year 22-23 budget, it only includes revenue projected through the November election. And despite this uncertainty as well, projected revenue combined with carry forward fund balance from the previous fiscal year allows us to fund all the vital services approved by the voters, as well as $1,220,771 in infrastructure funds in the fiscal 22-23 budget. In total, fiscal year 22-23 budget includes $2.4 million in expenditures and $640,000 in revenue. If Measure U passes, these vital services supported by Measure R will revert to previous funding levels, which were not sufficient to meet demand for services. The following slide shows a breakdown of the budget for fiscal year 22-23 based on category. You can see all the vital services that were covered during the initial part of the introduction of this presentation: law enforcement, code enforcement, animal services. We also have included a grant writer in Measure R for this fiscal year. We're hopeful that Measure R is retained. Planning services, and also, as I mentioned before, it's $1.2 million in infrastructure. I think it's worth noting, if you notice from the previous fiscal year of 21-22, that infrastructure adopted for fiscal year 22-23 is an increase of over $750,000 from 21-22. Key provision in maintaining the public's trust in Measure R is the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee. It's established by resolution. Citizens Oversight Committee consists of 7 members. 5 members are volunteer members of the public. The committee is required to meet at least once annually. This year's committee met 4 times during this past year. And I'll get to the end since I'm running out of time. Thank you, Denise. To ensure transparency and accountability, Measure R revenue expenditures are accounted for in a separate budget unit. They are not commingled with any other funds. Through the budget portal on the county website, this information is accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And here is a list of the budget team. We are available at any time to inform anybody who wants to discuss Measure R with us. And there's also a website included on this page where we can, on the county's website, where there's now a Measure R page accessible to the public as well, that has tons of information about Measure R. And I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. All right, now it's time to meet our candidates. Each candidate will take 1 minute to introduce themselves, starting with our school board district number 2, Abby Christ.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm Abby Christ. I'm running for school board in District 2. I grew up in Crescent City. My parents were teachers at the Del Norte High School. I attended Bess Maxwell, Crescent Elk, and Del Norte High School. When I graduated, I went to UC Davis. I came back after completing my studies at Davis and worked for 2 years in Crescent City during the day as a substitute teacher and at night waiting tables. That was back in the 80s, and I took the requisite backpack trip through Europe for a couple of months and then came back and worked some more. And 2 years after having graduated from college, I went down to and enrolled at Loyola Law School in LA. I stayed in LA, the LA area, for the next 30 plus years practicing law. And in the fall of 2019, I came back to Crescent City. My husband and I retired here. And when we came back, the teachers were on the brink of going on strike. I really think that this school district is having some very grave difficulties. I think my work as an attorney, which primarily involved investigation into issues, talking to various people involved in those issues, distilling the facts down to a certain pivotal facts, reaching a conclusion about our own position, and then working together with very often the opposing side to reach a consensus is something that I did for over 30 years. And I think those skills would be very helpful in the district. Oh, thank you. My family's here in Del Norte County. I have a deep and abiding concern about this school district. I think this community has always been so supportive of its children, but I think the schools really need to have some help. I think we need to quit pulling apart and start really pulling together. So thank you.
Next, we have Will Merriweather.
Oh. Hello, my name is Will Merriweather, and I am running for school board. So I guess there's a huge glare. I apologize for that. Let me adjust this down a little bit. So I am Will Merriweather. A little bit about me. I moved here back in 2015. Shortly after I graduated college in shortly after I finished college, I joined the Army and I moved to Washington, and I absolutely fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. And after I moved away, I always wanted to get back, and I was incredibly lucky to be able to move here in 2015. I teach history and political science at College of the Redwoods, and I absolutely love the students that I get. And by working at the college, I've been able to identify some of the issues that are in the Del Norte School District, as well as the positive aspects of being a member of or within the Del Norte School District. You know, I get to hear these stories from kids, and I really hope that being on the school board, not only can I be a voice for children who do not have the right to vote because they're underage, but that I can also be a voice for the entire school district, not just District 2. I've had kids that went to Bess Maxwell and Crescent Elk, even though I have not personally been in those schools. But I, just like Abby, I too have been involved in jobs before in which I've needed to work with people in which I may not necessarily agree with. And I think I can bring that as a strength to my candidacy. So, thank you.
Thank you, Will. Okay, we are going to move on to School Board District number 5, beginning with Michael Greer.
We're doing questions now.
You should be doing questions.
Oh.
There's at 6:30.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. We are going to alternate now and go back to Will. And the first question is going to be from Angela.
Angela Stanley, can you unmute?
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
can.
thank you.
Okay, let me get my question back up. Sorry, I'm in a car at the soccer game, so give me just 1 minute. All right. So I'm the mother of 3 children who go to different schools in the district. And these schools are in various states of disrepair. Our schools are currently at varying levels of having rundown infrastructure, and this directly impacts school environment and pride. For the school district to make the investments that are necessary to update most of our schools, however, requires the passage of a school bond measure. The last time a school bond was passed was back in 2008. Families in the community have different views regarding the ways that bond was spent. What would you do as a school board member to address the poor infrastructure of our schools? Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So there's 2 types of infrastructure that I would like to address, because there's the physical infrastructure that you're talking about. And this isn't something that is just Del Norte specific. This is throughout the entire nation in which our schools have crumbling infrastructure. And I would actually be in support of trying to put a bond measure on the ballot to improve our infrastructure. I also think that the district should reach out to state and federal government to try to help improve our school infrastructure. I know that as part of the Build Back Better plan, part of that was going to focus specifically on improving the dilapidated infrastructure positions throughout the entire United States. So there is some grant funding that we may be able to get to repair our schools. The other infrastructure that I would like to address is human infrastructure. And regardless of what buildings we have, we need human infrastructure. We need human beings to be in our classrooms with the students. We need to not only be able to retain the quality instructors that we have in the faculty, but we also need to be able to obtain new ones. And this also requires money. And so if we really want to focus on building the needs of our students, so that way they can compete in a globalized world, we have to invest in both the physical as well as the human infrastructure. And this is incredibly necessary because what we are going to see if we do not invest in our infrastructure is a Humboldt County that grows economically and a Humboldt County that teaches their students how to engage and participate in a globalized world, provided by funding from the state with the initiatives at Cal Poly Humboldt. And if we do not engage in that, and if we do not find a way to improve our standards here, then just 90 miles will separate us from a place in which the state is heavily investing and one in which they are not. And so we have to get the state involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Abby Christ,
Thank you.
addressing the same question.
I will. Thank you very much. I told you that I went to those schools and they were not new when I was there. So I know how old they are and kind of getting a little decrepit. But I do have to say, I agree with Will on one point. My priorities, since we don't have all the money we really want, hopefully we can get more money from the state, from grants, from other things to help us, and from bond measures to improve the infrastructure. But my priority too is human beings, people. When I came back to Del Norte County, I became a CASA volunteer helping with the foster youth here. And in that capacity, I have seen the lack of necessary, for example, people to assist the kids in reading. They start behind very often. And even though the teachers are doing some after school tutoring, trying to get tutors specifically to help the kids with reading is a problem, trying to get people to help the kids with emotional difficulties based on the trauma of going through the foster care system is a problem. I think if my priority would be putting people into the classrooms. I just think that's so incredibly important. And that is something I think I would really focus on as a first step.
Thank you very much. All righty. So we are going to go ahead and proceed with question number 2. Crystal.
Good evening. My name is Crystal Helton, and I am a mother of 3 boys. 2 of them go to Crescent Elk, and 1 goes to Margaret Keating School in Klamath. I want to start this question off by saying, yay, we have salad bars back in our schools, which has created a drastic shift from what our students were eating last year. At Margaret Keating in Klamath last year, our kids' vegetables, 4 out of 5 days were carrots. And I've also witnessed this year as well as last, what we like to call in our house, mystery meat, served cold and wrapped in plastic. Just today, my 2nd grader told me that he didn't eat his lunch because it was another mystery meat barbecue pork sandwich that was too gross to eat. So he spent the afternoon hungry. So now let me get to the question. When we talk to students and parents alike across school sites, many of them bring up the issue of not wanting to eat the food that's provided at school. Either the food is too processed, it's gross, it's moldy. This leads to things like food waste, as well as students continuing to go hungry because they don't want to eat what is provided. We have a high percentage of families who are food insecure and rely on eating school food. If you were on the school board, what action might you take to address what folks are saying about food?
Is it me first or is it
It
Will?
is you first. Yes. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I totally agree that we have a huge percentage of kids who are on either free meals or reduced cost meals. I think it was the statistic I read was 71%. I talked to a friend of mine actually when I saw this question was going to be asked, who actually works in Crescent Elk. And that's sort of the home kitchen, as I understand it, for all of the elementary schools, I believe, about this problem. And what I learned from speaking to her is that part of this issue is really COVID related. And I know we're all tired of hearing that, but she said they did absolutely no hot meals at all last year. Everything was processed food. Everything that came in was processed food. She says they're starting to do hot cooking now. She is as excited as you were about the salad bars. She's telling me they have the salad bars in almost all of the schools again. They're using fresh produce again. And I think they're making a concerted effort to make things better. They do a tremendous number of meals every day, breakfast, lunch, snacks, and I know there can be improvement. And I think there has to be improvement, and probably that has something to do with being able to hire enough people to do what needs to be done. But I do think that we can't just ignore the effect of COVID. I think they are very, very optimistic that the food is going to be improving, and it even now is improving. And I'm sorry to hear about the pork sandwich because that doesn't sound good. But that, I think we can look and see exactly if there really is a problem with personnel or if it's just the decisions that are being made about the foods that are coming. But I do know there's actually now cooking, and there's actually now fresh vegetables and produce coming in.
Thank you, Abby. Will, are you prepared there? You're
I am.
next.
So I'll wait till that pops up on the screen. So I actually agree with some of what Abby was saying. Part of this is COVID related, and that's not an excuse. As far as we're transitioning away from COVID and the food that students need. I know that, you know, Del Norte County has the program where students get free lunch, free breakfast. That was part of COVID, and that's a great program. But if students aren't eating, then it doesn't matter if that program exists or not, because students are still going home hungry. And for far too many of our students, it is the food that they get in school, which is going to help nourish them far longer than it needs to. And so part of this is personnel, you know, getting more individuals to be able to help with food preparation. It's great that, you know, some of the salad bars are coming back in, but we do have to make sure that there are healthier options, because teaching kids healthy eating habits at an early age is going to help set them up for success in the future, not only with their own diets, but healthy eating also leads to increased health benefits long term. And so as far as what I might take, partially to be gathering more information first. It may not be a great answer, but I would like to get more information before I can fully answer this. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Our last question will be delivered by Susan. And Will, we're back to
Okay.
you.
Okay, so I am Susan Andrews. I'm a school psychologist at Crescent Elk and Joe Hamilton, and a little bit at the high school and Castle Rock, doing mostly counseling. So this question is very relevant. Improving school climate is something that our families have been talking about for many years, and our local data indicates that we have a lot of work to do in this area. And then since COVID, the additional individual shared trauma that families have experienced has led to even worse school climate across multiple sites, increased violence, harassment, and bullying, and vaping to cope with anxiety. The district currently has frameworks that allow for restorative practices to be used within classrooms. These include positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBIS, and multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. However, many families do not understand these frameworks or see concrete effects resulting from those frameworks. They have expressed a desire, though, to see widespread implementation of diverse restorative practices that are more concrete, understandable, and culturally informed as a way to improve school climate. So, your question, as a school board member, how might you approach supporting an effort to shift culture and mindsets around restorative practices to improve school climate?
Okay, we're back to Abby.
We are? Okay.
No,
No, we're Will?
Will,
Okay.
Okay.
sorry, Will.
So part of this as a school board member has to be able to defend the aspect of restorative practices in our school. We need to not only defend that, we need to expand it. COVID created a fundamental shift in our students' ability to not only learn, but to engage with others. And there's a joke that one of my friends uses, that you have to be able to Maslow before you are able to bloom. And in order to do that, that requires, right, that requires meeting those base necessities. It ties back into that question that Crystal asked, as far as making sure that they have access to food and good quality food. It also means that making sure that there's a community emphasis on education. And when I say a community emphasis on education, I mean that everyone in the community needs to promote the idea that education is beneficial, not just to get a job, but it's beneficial for human development and human growth. We cannot, as humans, build lifelong relationships and quality relationships if we do not understand ourselves or our ability to communicate with each other. And that is a fundamental aspect that needs to be incorporated at all levels within our school system. And not only is this important, but we have to encourage students to read. And that means having parents and community members encouraging students to read. And that means all of our students in our community need to be encouraged to do so. If we can identify that a student, based on their reading level at 3rd grade, can impact the trajectory of their life, then that means that in those early stages, we need to emphasize reading and making sure that they're able to read at grade level. As they're transitioning. One of the last things that I want to highlight is that we have an incredibly diverse community, and this community is only going to get more diverse as climate change continues to impact the landscapes around us, and we have more climate refugees coming here. And so as our population changes, we need to be able to engage with other individuals, and that begins at the educational sector. There is one thing that I do want to point out, that building community programs is vital, and serving the community is vital. And I would like to actually, sorry. Okay, I will stop. All right, thank you.
All right. All right, Abby, your turn.
Okay, thank you. Another thing, well, let me just back up for a moment. I recall from when my parents were teaching, and even now my sister teaches in the school district, there are some children out there for whom those teachers are the most reliable things in their lives. It's a very sad thing to say, but it's true. And it seems to me that it is helpful to have very clear boundaries for kids so they know that certain boundary, they can go to a certain place, or they can have boundaries, and they know what will happen if they hit that boundary. That uncertainty, I think, is just a horrible thing for a child to experience. I know the district has certain disciplinary, for lack of a better word, protocols in place, but I don't think they are implemented in any kind of a consistent manner. I think everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. I think it would be very, very helpful to try to get some consistency going and some support behind the decisions that are made. These children really, there's a couple of issues, particularly with kids. One is the disruption of education. If there is a problem in the classroom, then it's very, very difficult for the teacher who is trying to deal with the other children to move forward with that. So there needs to be people who can come alongside and help with maybe taking some kids out and let them just decompress a little bit and then come back into the classroom. But I think it's very difficult to have the teacher, in the midst of trying to teach a class, try to deal with these kids too. It goes back to what I was saying about the need for people to come in and help kids who are having emotional problems, things that make it difficult for them to learn. And it's good to hear from one of the school psychiatrists about the fact, and it sounds like she does a lot of counseling at a lot of different schools, but we need help. We need more people to come in, more support for these kids. Thank you. I saw the pink sign coming up.
Okay, we are moving to our school board district number 5 with Michael Greer introducing himself. And you have 1 minute, Michael Greer.
Shall we leave?
Thank you. I appreciate this okay, I appreciate this opportunity. I keep hearing an echo. I moved here after the fires in Paradise. So I've been here for a couple of years. The day after I moved in, I started doing long-term substitution for Del Norte School District. I worked at Pine Grove, doing their special education K-5 for the entire year, well, which was about 3 weeks before COVID, and they shut everything down. But they kept me on to continue with the students at that time. The following year, I was asked to, in October through May, to work at Joe Hamilton doing the K-5 special education also. Since that time, I have been subbing at different schools, whether Margaret Keating, Crescent Elk, the high school. So I still work there. Education is my life. In Paradise, I was on the school board for 14 years. I was the president of the school board at the time of the fire. So as my family moved to a different area to live, I rented an apartment to continue for another year as the president to get the kids back into school, finding places and rebuilding the school district. You know, I feel it a real pleasure to be here and be able to run for the school board. I think my knowledge, my experience politically, because I have done many different things politically for education, both in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento. And so I'm looking forward to doing the same thing for the school board here. Thank you.
All right, you know, I forgot to say thank you to both Abby and Meriwether there. So thank you very much. I hope you can hear this gracious thank you. But we are going to still move on to Philip Williams, and he has 1 minute to introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Philip Williams, and I was born and raised here in Del Norte County. I was born in Seaside Hospital. I attended Margaret Keating School, I attended Crescent Oak School, and I attended Del Norte High School. Is my camera working? I don't see
No,
this.
we don't see you. We'd love to see you too as well.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, wasting my minute. There we go. No, I'm a lifelong Del Norte member. Also, you know, I'm a member of the Yurok tribe. I'm a Yurok tribe council member. And I've worked in Margaret Keating School. You know, I started coaching there way back in 2000. I have 7 grandchildren that attend Del Norte County schools. And I know the needs of the 5th district of Margaret Keating School. I've been on the ground level. All the issues we're talking about today, I've been a part of it and I've seen it. And I'm really, really happy to be a part of this group to run. I think everybody here has strengths, and I'm just happy to be a part, put myself out there.
Thank you, Philip. All right, we will begin with the first question. Angela. We're back to you. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes to answer the question. Angela, are you there?
There we go. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm here now. All right. Hi. As I said earlier, my name is Angela Stanley. I'm the parent of 3 students in the district, 1 at CR, 1 at the high school, and 1 at Smith River. Currently, when my kids walk through their schools, they're not necessarily proud of their schools. There are holes in the paneling at Smith River. My children worry, you know, I worry for their safety. And my students aren't always filled with pride at the look of their school. They want to have that sense of pride when visitors come onto campus. So since our schools are currently at a varying levels of having rundown infrastructure, and this directly impacts school environment and pride, for the school district to make the investments that are necessary to update most of our schools. However, this requires the passage of a school bond measure. The last time a school bond was passed was back in 2008. Families in the community have different views regarding the ways that bond money was spent. What would you do as a school board member to address the poor infrastructure of our schools?
Okay, since Michael went first, we're going to start with Philip.
Okay, thank you. You know, I was thinking about this and, you know, public bonds is one avenue that we could use, but I think right now with the government, the way that it is, with the infrastructure bill we passed last year, it's time to go after that money. There's a lot of free money out there. I think this is the golden time to go after that. We need grant writers. We need to look at all the avenues out there. You know, at the Yurok tribe, we've went after a lot of that money, and we've got a lot of that money from the infrastructure bill. And so I know it's out there. One of the things that I think we're challenged though is, you know, with the grant writers. I'm not sure of the staff of the school, but what we've been looking into doing is hiring consultants to go after that money. It's worth it to invest some money to hire consultants to go after those grant opportunities because it's going to pay us in the long run. School bonds, you know, I think that's secondary. I think if we exhaust all the grant opportunities, we always have the school bond measure to go back to back us up. You know, the schools are super old. You know, my parents went to school there, and the pandemic didn't help any. Right? We've been neglecting our schools for 2 more years, and there's been some work done, but not enough. And so I just think we capitalize on the climate of the government right now and go after that free money. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Okay, I've had a lot of experience with this in Paradise prior to the fire. We were on a program to replace all of our portables. The school district here and all the schools were built at the same time as they were in Paradise. There are ways to replace the portables and get money from the state. Education is politics. And that's what needs to be done in order to help with our infrastructure. Because there are people you can talk to get on the list to go ahead and refurbish, redo, rebuild the district because it needs it. I've been at, you know, at the different schools. I've seen what you was talking about with the panels knocked out up at Smith River. I've substituted there. And it's not a nice looking school, but it should be. And only through being able to address those issues through political means, financial means, and grant means. Because as Philip said, the money is there. But you have to know how to go about and get that. The other part is kind of like the other candidate said, you have the physical structure that needs to be done, but you also have the human infrastructure that you need to do. I've been fortunate enough in my school board time and also as a union president and working with CTA to be able to have the contacts to bring in the people that would like to move here, the teachers that would like to come up here, you know, out of the cities. But we have to have the things necessary for them to come. And we need to take a look at that.
Crystal, present the second question. Crystal.
Hi, candidates. First of all, I live in District 5, and I just want to thank you both for running. My name is Crystal Helton, and I have 3 sons who go to, 2 of them go to Crescent Elk, and 1 of them goes to Margaret Keating in Klamath. And I want to start this question by recognizing that, yay, we have salad bars back in our schools, which has created a drastic shift in how and what our students are eating. since last year. At Margaret Keating last year, our kids were eating mainly, I would say 4 out of 5 days, they were eating carrots as their vegetable. And I've also witnessed this year as well as last, what we like to call in my house, mystery meat, served cold and wrapped in plastic, something I would not serve to anyone. And just today, my second grader told me, because I asked him, how was lunch today? What did you have? I'm asking this question. He said, I didn't eat it. I was hungry when I got to the Boys and Girls Club after school. And he didn't eat it because it was another, pork barbecue mystery meat that was too gross for him to eat. We all know that nutrition and health are directly linked to our kids' ability to learn. And with that, I'm just gonna ask the question, when we talk to students and parents alike across school sites, many of them bring up this issue of not wanting to eat the food that's provided at school. Either the food is too processed, it's too gross, it's moldy. This leads to things like food waste, as well as students continuing to go hungry because they don't want to eat what is provided. We have a high percentage of families who are food insecure and rely on eating school food. If you were on the school board, what action might you take to address what folks are saying about food?
Well, I was down at Margaret Keating. I was kind of surprised that when I was talking to the teacher who came in a little bit later in the day about the snacks, that she had to furnish all the afternoon snacks herself. Where the other schools I go to, they're furnished with snacks. I really think that the outlying areas, Margaret Keating, Gatsby, Smith River, should be able to go ahead and prepare the majority of their food on site. By doing it on site, they'll be able to have much more nutritious food to go ahead and to partake of, because it is necessary. We know that the district qualifies for free lunch, free breakfast, because of the social economic status of the residents in Del Norte County. But we need to make it, something that they want to eat with it. I've seen some of the ones that I didn't want to eat. One of the things I would do is not only visit the cafeterias, but I'd also eat that food. Okay, that's what I did previously. And I had a great working relationship with the cafeteria. They have some restrictions because it is a federal program. And there's still money involved as how much they can give people, what they can get, and a lot of that's federal. And so some of the things we'd like to have them do, they're not legally can do. But it's something we need to work at, to use local things into the classrooms themselves even.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the initiative and knowing that it was your turn. I want to remind candidates, though, to wait for myself to call on you, please, so that we can keep some type of order. So, Philip, it is your turn now.
Yeah, thank you. This has been going on for a long, long time. My children were going to school here in 2000. And we looked at this back then. Back then, we had the California Conservation Corps was up at the radar base on Requa Hill, and they came down and prepared foods for Margaret Keating School. But then again, it wasn't sustainable. We weren't able to get all the money to keep that going, and that's why that failed. I think we really need to look at the quality control and really take a look at the outlying schools, as Michael stated. The town schools, they get pretty fresh food, but by the time it's prepared, ready for transport, and finally makes it to the outlying schools like Margaret Keating, Gatsby, and Smith River, the quality's been degraded. And so I think we need to look at our policies, the procedures that are in place. That's what we do as a board. We do policies and procedures. We create a position of quality control to ensure that food is up to par. For the long term, it ties in with the infrastructure. Margaret Keating School doesn't have the infrastructure to prepare food on site. Everything has been outdated. I went to school there in the 80s, and we could barely do it then. but those things are tied together. If we can get the infrastructure to put a new kitchen in there, and then as we talked about the humans, get the people to fill those positions, then we can start preparing on-site food. But it's all going to be tied together. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it is now your turn to answer the third question, which will be presented by Susan.
Okay, so I am Susan Andrews. I'm a school psychologist working mostly at Crescent Elk and Joe Hamilton and doing mostly counseling this year. So I know that improving the school climate is something that our families have been talking about for many years. And our local data indicates that we have a lot of work to do in this area. Since COVID, the additional individual and shared trauma that families have experienced has led to even worse school climate across multiple sites. This means increased violence, harassment, and bullying, and vaping to cope with anxiety. The district currently has frameworks that allow for restorative practices to be used within classrooms, and these include positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS, and multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS. However, many of the families don't understand these frameworks, or they don't see concrete effects resulting from those frameworks. They have expressed a desire, though, to see widespread implementation of diverse restorative practices that are more concrete, understandable, and culturally informed as a way to improve school climate. So, our question to you, as a school board member, how might you approach supporting an effort to shift culture and mindsets around restorative practices to improve the school climate?
Philip.
Okay. I was a little intimidated by this, but we do restorative justice, here at the Yurok tribe. And I think as a school board member, we need to implement some curriculum. There's curriculum that's available out there that through exercises and games can show the value of restorative justice. At the Yurok tribe, we have a game called Settle Up that teaches restorative justice, teaches the value of if you offend somebody, how to make it right. There's consequences. And I think many cultures have this, and we have Hmong cultures, we have Hispanic culture here. There's so many diverse that we could use all of those cultures to teach, how to give back, the value of when you offend somebody, how to make it right. Because in a small community, that means a lot. We're going to see that person again. And so we always need to have somewhere down the road, this person who we had issue with is going to affect our life once again. And so I think through cultural activities also involve parents. The parents also need to be involved and understand what restorative justice is. Children are sponges. They are learning from the adults around them. And so if we're going to inform the children, then also the parents need to know how to implement this at home and understand the value of restorative justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
I've had the opportunity to go ahead and practice it in the classroom as a resource teacher and a special day class teacher. I have some of those students throughout my teaching career that we've had those type of issues. And I think when you take a look at it, Philip, it's something I think that is extremely important. You can't just do it with the students. Parents have to be a part of that. The teacher can only do so much because she has, the teacher has another 30 students to teach. So what is a process? We need to have a very specific process. It needs to be standardized throughout the district. Susan is absolutely correct that there has been more violence, more bullying since COVID. These things are happening. We need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge the relationships that have to be established. And that's why the teacher is so important. They establish the relationships with the students and the parents to be able to bring them together. And administrators are doing the same thing. Okay. The other thing is that we don't hold students responsible anymore. We don't hold parents responsible anymore. They need to understand their responsibility that they have for what they do and be able to acknowledge that maybe they made a mistake and how do we go about repairing that so we don't have it. And those need to be taught. There are programs in the classes right now that teachers use continuously to go ahead and help that, because if they have a problem in the classroom, they can't teach. They do everything they can so they can teach.
Thank you so much, Michael Greer and Philip Williams, for answering those questions in your most thoughtful ways. So we're going to move forward now with the Board of Supervisors for District 4. We're going to have them introduce themselves, beginning with Joey Borges. Did Joey Borges make it today?
I just see Patty.
Okay. Well, we are so lucky to have you there, Patty. Patty Adams, can you give us a minute of your time to introduce yourself?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We want to see you too.
Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Good evening. My name is Patty Adams, and as you know, I'm running for Board of Supervisors for District 4, the district that I grew up in Fort Dick. My parents, Peter and Jeanette Nesbitt, and 2 sisters. My dad was a logger in construction, basically doing anything he could to support our family. My mom was primarily a homemaker, but she also worked in the lily fields. She's also Yurok and Karuk, which is where I received that heritage from. So went to Redwood Elementary, Del Norte High School, moved on to Chico State, graduated there with a bachelor's in communications, organizational communications to be specific. Moved down to the Bay Area for about 30 plus years, where I worked for large corporate America, companies like GE, Ryder, Chrysler, etc. In 2016, moved back home, married Harry Adams, and became a realtor. We also own a boat business, but I wanted to be more involved in the community because the current Del Norte County is nothing like the Del Norte County that I left.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sure.
Since I do not see Borges here, I believe we are going to begin our questions, beginning with Daphne.
Hi, my name is Daphne Cortez Lambert. I came to Crescent City 24 years ago, and I was fleeing domestic abuse. I came with my 4-year-old daughter, and I was homeless. And I ended up going to college for the College of the Redwoods, working 3 jobs, and finally got myself and my daughter a little place. We ended up getting a presidential award through College of the Redwoods, and I ended up going on to get my bachelor's for drug and alcohol counseling. Many of my friends I grew up with were not as lucky, and most of my friends have lost their lives due to addiction and the choices that they made. Because of that, I'm very passionate about serving the people that do not have homes, the people that do not have opportunities. Because of my background, I actually ended up working with the homeless community for the last 15 years, and I founded Del Norte Mission Possible. Del Norte Mission Possible is about giving a voice to the people that do not have voices. I believe that that the people who do not have homes are part of Del Norte County's most untapped resource. And we are, even though COVID is happening right now or had happened, we have made such amazing strides in homelessness and the way the community is working together. And I think we're at a point where we can really change things. So my question to you is, what will you do to be part of that change to end the homelessness?
So I've looked into this a little bit. Obviously, it's a challenging topic. And I've given the answer that most people seem to come up with is that you need to have housing paired with programs. So you have a full workaround solution. That's all well and good. But I think there's more to it. They are all humans just as we are. A lot of people are just a paycheck away from becoming homeless. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have a family, it could happen to anyone. So I would love to be very involved in it. Sometimes I've heard that some of the homeless don't like going into shelters or housing that's provided because they would not be able to have their pets with them. Recently, when I was in Reno, they have a fairly large housing community for homeless where you can bring your cat or your dog, and they have all of the facilities right there, kind of on their little campus, veterinarians, plus all of the services that you would expect for the human, the mental health, the drug or alcohol addiction specialists, et cetera. So I would be extremely supportive. I think the challenge might be also where to find the housing to allow people to have this freedom, this ability to feel that they have a place they can call home.
Thank you, Patty. Okay, Mike, you are up next with the next question for Patty.
Hi, Patty. Yeah, a few weeks ago, a bunch of us from True North sat down with our new sheriff, Garrett Scott, and we listened to an incredible list of challenges that he's dealing with right now. Challenges that include a failing infrastructure, lack of personnel, a need for a lot more training, and he needs to find ways to integrate county services in order to manage the needs of his people, his deputies, and all first responders as they deal with the people of our community that are, as Daphne pointed out, so many of them living what we call in the rough. And then also in order to help him deal with, to meet the needs of the private citizens and businesses that our homeless people affect. So if you were elected to office, how would you support Sheriff Scott in his work to meet those challenges?
I think Garrett Scott is doing an amazing job. I think he stepped into office and has just made great strides. You're right, he has a ton of challenges, but he's also making changes already. I think part of it is communication with the community. I don't know that everyone out there, all of the citizens of Del Norte County, realize what he's facing. I think that a lot of people also don't understand that because we have such a lack of mental health resources, that a lot of times it is a uniformed deputy that is stepping in with a homeless person or a mental health, and probably the worst thing for them. Yeah, I mean, if you're already afraid and just scared, and then here's this deputy, you're probably thinking you're getting hauled away. You're not thinking that they're to help you. So I think part of it would be to support the Sheriff's Department as much as possible. Again, the communications, they do need more staff. They are hiring. I know that they received a $31 million appropriations fund to help either remodel or build possibly a new facility. They've also would like to have perhaps a community garden to help with the inmates, which again is not addressing the homeless, but it would be something that would be nice for the jail and the morale. I'm not sure. It would be interesting to perhaps have somebody on the staff that made the homeless part of their prime duties or core, so that they would be the subject matter expert for the Sheriff's Department. I think that when you do a ride along with the sheriffs, They know exactly where everyone is. They're familiar with all of the camps, and it's they're not strangers. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our last question comes from Pat.
Hi. So, for a while it was like rising temperatures, rising sea levels were far away. And then, paradise burned and we've been breathing the smoke from all those fires. And it came a lot closer to home. So I'm one of those people who thinks, there are things that we can do. Yeah, these are world problems, but there are things we can do. And what hit me and what started me on this question was I was reading about how Phoenix has planted a lot of trees and to lower the temperature in Phoenix. Now, I know people might laugh about lowering the temperature in Crescent City. I'm wrapped up in my shawl, but the whole idea of the trees as being the lungs of the planet and breathing for us and stuff. And then a block from my house, they decided to build something there. And believe me, I'm totally in favor of building housing. I know how desperate that is, but they knocked down every single tree there. And it was, it didn't make sense to me because there was an underground stream right there. Those trees were willow trees. So who's sucking up the water now? And who's being the lungs of Crescent City? So it just brought me to this question. So I wrote it out because I could go on for hours. But as you know, climate change is forcing huge changes in many parts of the world. Hurricanes, tornadoes, rising ocean levels, and Northern California fires continue yearly devastation. There are many things that can be done on a local level to both mitigate and prepare for these changes. Examples range from replacing the aging county cars with electric vehicles. I understand those cars are needing to be replaced soon, to passing green building ordinances, to supporting the removal of the dams on the Klamath River, while also preparing for an influx of people whose homes were destroyed. I mean, we just heard from one by the fires, or people working on the offshore wind farms. If elected, how would you proactively address these issues?
So there's a couple issues you brought up. There's the housing issue, which you touched on, and then there's also the climate change issue. So you did bring up a couple of ideas that I had for the climate change. Once upon a time, I did an internship with the Forest Service right out of college, and the people are passionate. But one thing that I did learn from them is trees are a renewable resource. So yes, it's terrible that they cut down these trees in this specific neighborhood. But something else that happened when I lived in the Bay Area is I had a lot of trees that I didn't necessarily like on my property. So I went to the planning department, and their program was pretty easy. You want to take out 5 trees, you plant 5 more trees. So I think that that would be a very easy fix. It can be a fruit tree. It can, it can be something that the property owner would like to have and enjoy. I think that's one idea. Some of the other things about the green building, I totally agree with. I think that green housing can sometimes be more expensive up front at the beginning of the building, but the payoff is there over the long term. Something I would be curious about is, what is our policy for our county buildings? Do we turn off everything at night? That's another savings. Oh, okay. Let me see. So it was more popular in the Bay Area to do the riding to work, bike to work. And I know you can understand the roadblocks we might have here with our weather in the winter, but it's also an awareness. So again, just maybe some public service announcements about trying to lighten our carbon footprint, to turn off the lights when not in use, to line dry your clothing or use the wool balls. I mean, there are more effective ways to do small changes every day. And okay, so thank you.
All right. I want to thank you for attending our forum.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're sorry that you didn't have your opponent there. We're sorry he didn't show up. But moving on, we are going to go to the School Board District 5. or I'm sorry, the Board of Supervisors, District 5. And we have 1 minute, beginning with Sue Maston to introduce herself.
Good evening. My family has always lived at the mouth of the Klamath River, where it meets the Pacific Ocean. And I have lived here most of my life. I've been fortunate to work here, to have a successful business here, and to serve in public service. We are so fortunate to live in this beautiful place. But what I've found since serving as supervisor is that we lack plans for addressing current needs as well as for future needs. And I truly believe that your voice is important and crucial in government. And so I believe a good leader provides for transparency and accountability. And as your supervisor, I have demonstrated this by actively holding town hall meetings, economic development and tourism. Also, I was part of holding the first budget workshop on the general fund for 2022-23. So, you know, this is a wonderful opportunity. I have been so excited to meet so many people who are so generous with their time, expertise, and knowledge, and that I believe people create change, not government, and that, you know, by actively engaging the community in the development of policies and ordinances and plans, that then we have the buy-in and support of citizens, and they begin to have hope and in the future. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with our community in developing solutions for the homeless, for public safety, for education, for all the issues that we face here in Delaware County. So I appreciate this time to address everyone tonight.
Thank you. I'm going to remind you to turn your video on because we want to see your lovely face. So next we have.
Realized wasn't on. So sorry.
That's okay. You'll have a chance to. There you go. Thank you. Now we have Dean Wilson. Please take a minute to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Dean Wilson. Some of you may remember I was sheriff of Delaware County between 2002 and 2014. During that period of time, I was fortunate enough to have been elected 3 times, and I learned a lot about how county government operates. I learned a lot about the budget, as well as I know still many of the individuals that work within the county offices and budgets. So I have a knowledge. It's during that period of time as sheriff that I learned that the job was really to look towards the horizon, to see what is coming and what challenges await us, and then to plan and prepare to properly meet those challenges. You can't avoid the bad times, you can't avoid the storms, but what you can do is make sure that you understand what is coming and then to navigate and to plan appropriately to get through those difficult times the best we can. The reason why I ran was not only to fill the position left vacant by Bob Berkowitz, to fill that last 2 years, but also because I see difficult times ahead of us. As we deal with the inflation and the rising interest rate costs, there are difficult times, and this is not an economically robust community. Those times are going to challenge us all. They're challenging the young and they're challenging the old as they try to live within their means. And I can see as if elected as Board of Supervisor member, that I can help in that adjustment. How do we plan to provide the services that we do need to plan for, and how do we get our community through this? We have to look, because our community is a wonderfully resilient one, but we have to look towards each other to solve these problems and to come together to help each other through these difficult times. We can't always be looking towards government for solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Dean, you will be addressing the first question from Daphne. We are alternating.
Hi, my name is Daphne Cortez Lambert, and I came here 24 years ago as a homeless woman, a single parent. I was fleeing domestic abuse. I also had a history of addiction. I ended up going to College of the Redwoods, and later on getting my bachelor's degree. While I was at College of the Redwoods, I worked 3 jobs trying to support my family. And after I got my bachelor's degree, I started working with the homeless for, I've worked with them for the last 15 years. And I know that I'm nothing special. I'm one life that was changed. And our homeless have the opportunity of being a very valuable resource. I know that our community, although we are rural, is also really wonderful at knitting together in collaboration. I have seen more changes and strides forward with the homeless community in the last 2 years than I've seen in like the last 15 years. And many people that I grew up with have lost their lives. We are seeing more and more people lose their lives who are unhoused. And I'm wondering, you know, what all of that makes me very, very passionate about people reaching their potential, about our community working together. And so with all the new innovative ideas that we have that are going forth in collaboration, I'm wondering what you would do if elected to end homelessness in our county.
Well, one, I'm not foolish enough to believe that we can end homelessness. I mean, as long as I've lived in Del County, we have dealt with a homeless population. We just never have dealt with the explosion of homelessness as we've seen today. And this is a self-inflicted wound, one that we did to ourselves when we basically decriminalized a lot of the drug behavior, as well as decriminalizing a lot of the theft that often supports that drug addiction. And so we need to look at the homelessness not as a problem as much as it is a symptom that we have really caused for ourselves. And we need to go back and look at how we brought that about. In Del County, one of the issues that is plaguing a lot of our communities is the homeless that are in the backyards and in the residential areas that are often causing problems for those neighborhoods. And we have to develop, like many other communities have, a location that they can be safe, that they can receive the programs that are available for them. They can have access to those programs more readily, and they can be given safety and security within an area. Many counties and communities have those areas, and they have been very successful. I'd like to see one of those types of areas developed here in Del County. I think we can do it. I know several locations already in mind that are close to the services that they do need, medical, food, as well as security and law enforcement. So we can bring those kinds of programs into Del County, utilize the resources that we already have here much better, much more efficiently, as we can find the individuals that need the help. But it also gives tools to local law enforcement to move that population that is in areas where we have crime and other issues associated with their presence, and move those individuals away from those problem areas and into a location where we can better monitor and control that behavior and lessen the problems that we often see in many of our neighborhoods all through District 5 that I'll be representing. Thank you.
Susan, the same question to you.
I missed the very end of your question because I got kicked off for some reason.
Oh, no.
So just the last sentence of your question, but I think that I can go ahead and address it. As you know, Daphne, I've had the privilege of meeting you and talking about the activities that Mission Impossible has been able to bring to our homeless. I have also taken a tour of all of the large homeless camps in my district, and most of them are in my district. So I know very well what those camps look like and what the needs are within those camps. I am looking forward. I did some research in what's out there, what are the best practices out there, and I identified Rogue Valley because they have from assessment to independent living and everything in between with wraparound services to address addiction or to address, not wanting to live in a home and providing, a safe and secure place for them. So I'm really excited about taking the tour that we have planned, Daphne, outside of this, to go to Rogue Valley and take a look at those services and programs and the different levels of activities. I have planned a meeting as a supervisor with the critical departments, DHHS for services, code enforcement, for what's going on also with the sheriff, to take a look at what can we begin to develop and plan for the county in addressing this issue. But I also want to go to the people to be able to get their ideas for solutions, because there are a lot of people who are concerned about the homeless and have great ideas and want to be a part of the solution, including those who live at the entrances of these camps. So I'm looking forward to addressing this as the days come.
Thank you, Susan. We want to respect your time, and we're definitely going over. Maybe we would like to ask you if you have 10 more minutes to answer our remaining 2 questions. Dean and Susan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. So the second question will be delivered by Mike. And Sue, you will answer that question first.
Thank you. And Mike Tompkins, I'm just a member of True North, what they call a leader. Now, a few weeks ago, we sat down with our new sheriff, Garrett Scott, and listened to the litany of challenges that he's facing right now. Challenges like the failing infrastructure, lack of personnel. Oh, I didn't turn off on my camera. I was on a moment ago. Sorry about that. It's a wayward mouse. Actually, my mouse has a mind of its own. And so, and he also is wanting to find ways to integrate county services into his operations so he can better manage the needs that we've been talking about that have already been brought to you through Daphne, of our the homeless people of our community that live in the rough, and also the private citizens and businesses that they affect. So if you are elected to office or elected to remain in office, how will you support Sheriff Scott and help him meet those challenges?
Well, I actually did a tour of the jail before I became the supervisor. And so I was really familiar with it. So I have held several meetings with Sheriff Scott to talk about the issues that he is facing, because they are huge. And as a supervisor, I have helped to identify funds to get him additional officers in the jail, and to also remove some barriers to getting through the HR process so that those officers could be hired, but also to ensure that there is full-time medical staff at the jail. And by doing this, then we keep our inmates and our officers safe, and it's crucial to be able to provide for that. We also, the state of the jail is deplorable, and that's through decades of neglect. And so we do have $3 million that was appropriated, but we must develop a plan to be able to refurbish or to build a new facility. And that's going to take additional dollars either way, because there is a lot of work to be done over there to bring it back to the standards. And so I'm committed to providing Sheriff Scott with everything and anything that he needs to create stability and to fill the expectations of the citizens, as well as to protect the safety and well-being of the inmates and the officers.
Thank you, Susan. Dean?
Well, there's probably nobody better than I to speak about this issue, because it's one that I dealt with for 12 years. And it's also one that's plaguing many sheriffs throughout the state of California, and that is the mental health issues dealing within the jail, which are critical. We have unfortunately in the state of California divested ourselves of our responsibility in dealing with those that have mental health issues. The state has shut down facilities, and the limited facilities sometimes result in county jails having to deal with those who have severe mental health issues in our jails for years, sometimes over a year at times, before they're actually even taken into a state facility to be assessed. This is a criminal process. Not only does it violate the rights of the individuals that we're talking about, but it also places them in a hazardous situation, as the jails are not facilities for the mentally ill, but they have become our warehouses. The problems that exist within Delaware County are really truly issues of personnel.
Yes, you could cut Dana loose.
Are really issues of personnel, and it's one of the things that they really need to deal with. That is to hold individual officers accountable for violations of policy and procedure. Those things that we had seen, the images that we saw were clear violations of policy and need to be dealt with and should have been dealt with. But it's also personnel issues. Holding people accountable, responsible for their duty and for the adhering to jail policy is important. And it's one of the things I know that Garrett is going to deal with as he goes forward as sheriff of Delaware County. The issue with the jail is it is old. It needs to be there needs to be a new facility. We had an opportunity to seek money out many years ago when AB 109 went through, when they were releasing millions of dollars out to counties, but unfortunately we did not take advantage of that process because there were matching funds and the county did not have the ability to match those funds at the time. As we go forward, as if elected, I'll be looking towards resolutions to issues that deal with the jail, but also giving Garrett the time and support that he needs to resolve the issues dealing with at the jail. And this is not something that's going to be solved within a year or two. This is going to take multiple years to resolve the situation, because even hiring can take over a year sometimes to find the right personnel to fit into these jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And sorry if you heard my little whoopsie in there. My apologies. So we will move on though with our last question by Pat.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. As you know, climate change is forcing huge changes in many parts of the world. There are hurricanes, tornadoes, rising ocean levels, and here in Northern California, we've had yearly devastation with the fires. There are many things that can be done on a local level to both mitigate and prepare for these changes. Examples range from replacing the aging county cars with electric vehicles, to passing green building ordinances, to supporting the removal of the dams on the Klamath River, while also preparing for an influx of people whose homes were destroyed by the fires, for example, or people working on the offshore wind farms. If elected, how would you proactively address these issues?
Is this for me or for Dean?
Lupe, who's it for?
This is for Susan.
Susan.
Sorry, my bad.
Okay, thank you. So scientists have said that the most effective tools for addressing climate change are farmlands and forests, which we have an abundance of. So we need to make sure that we preserve that footprint and protect it as we move forward. And by doing this, we need to take a look at what are those things in our policy for government in the day-to-day workplace that we can do to reduce our impact on climate change. We also need to take a look also ordinances for the green building. In order to do that, though, you got to have a plan and plan for that growth, because there will be more people coming. We have seen this through the fires that have occurred in Northern California. We already have people moving to this area, and we need to plan for that growth. And our infrastructure needs to be planned for in a way that considers climate change. So that means we should be developing a plan that takes that into mind. And I look forward to developing this with the constituents, because I think it's important that you involve them in the process, because then you're going to have people who are working together to ensure that we're addressing climate change today and tomorrow. So I don't know what else to add to this. I know that we're not prepared for it and that we can't wait any longer to be able to address. So, you know, that's pretty much it.
All right, Dean.
Oh, sorry. One little quick thing to encourage tomorrow's generation to, you know, grow foods for us and identify lands to be able to do that. I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right, Dean.
Yes, it's one of those issues, especially with the wildfire situations, that really address a lot of the gross mismanagement of our forests. U.S. Forest Service, unfortunately, has control of a large portion of our forest and have allowed its overgrowth and to allow much more fuel on the ground than even their fire plan allots for. It would be good, and I think it would be behooving of us to go back into those forests and to thin it to those plans that the U.S. Forest Service has done. This would not only create jobs in our communities, but it would also produce some tax-based revenues for our government to help offset its costs going forward. One of the things that is with the devastations that we've seen from wildfires is to go in after those and to harvest, try to rejuvenate the soils, because often the flames have been too intense for there to be any nutrient value in them, and then to replant those forests as soon as we can. It is the growing and the growing of young forests that often produce the most oxygen and help to release this carbon dioxide in our environment. I will look towards trying to encourage that kind of activity within our communities to try to rejuvenate it. What I'm more concerned about, though, is the rising cost of inflation and, of course, the interest rates, and those kinds of things are going to devastate our community much quicker and much more efficiently than the rising global warming issues. What we're dealing with now with our inflationary costs is going to affect us more directly. And as those things that I'm more concerned about and more addressing as if elected into our as supervisor, is how is the government going to prepare itself for these times when loans are much more, the interest rates are much higher, but the inflationary cost of just operating on a day-to-day basis has increased. Much like your home, our government is very limited and it has a set budget, and that budget is going to be able to afford less and less as the cost and expense of things, and yet the demand for services is going to increase. And I look forward to addressing those issues as best we can as we go forward as a community. But it's one of those things that's going to bring us all together, because we have to work together to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue Maston and Dean Wilson. We appreciate your thoughts on the questions. We are bringing this forum to a closing. And the last thing I just want to add is get that vote out. So encourage your friends to get the vote out. And we have final words from our pastor, Dana Gilport.
Thank you. My name is Reverend Dana Gilport, and I am pastor at the United Methodist Churches here in Del Norte County. And I would like to leave us with a closing prayer, if you will. It is an interfaith benediction, and it's a variation of an interfaith prayer from a Unitarian Universalist pastor, Gary Kawasaki. Let us pray. We are gathered here with our differing cultures and faith, and we give thanks for the blessings we all find here in Del Norte County as we share our common dreams and goals. Homes and schools where children thrive, neighborhoods that are clean and safe, access to shelter for those who want it, a city and county rich in diversity, an economy where no one is expendable, a beloved community in which all have access to the opportunity for a dignified and productive life that lends itself to Del Norte being further enriched and our lives better because of it. Enable us to leave this place, to carry forth this prayer into the coming month and election cycle, that we may turn our thoughts toward our collective efforts of acceptance, human dignity, justice, and peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everybody, and get the vote out among friends, supporters.